It's 9:30 and time for me to open this session of the Enfield Local Plan Examination. I'm Stephen Lee, the Inspector appointed by the Secretary of State to examine the plan and report to the Council in due course. We are in new surroundings and very nice they are too, with very few people here, so I don't need to necessarily go through my spiel. Obviously we have a new representative from the Council, but I assume you're fully aware of how this is all going to work, so you don't need me to run through my spiel. I think how it's going to work, obviously Mr Burns has been here quite a lot. We will do introductions and housekeeping as normal, just in case, as we're in a new room, whether it changes anything. Then I'll see if there are any matters arising from the Council, and I've got a couple of announcements from myself, and then we'll move into the agenda. When, obviously, Mr Burns, you could just point out, remind me which site or sites you're interested in. I know you're here this afternoon as well. Unfortunately, I can't roll this morning's session in because there are other people coming this afternoon. But if, obviously you could we could deal with your site or sites first, and then you can obviously stay and watch or depart and whatever you like. So we'll do introductions first. So work out, change the order if need be, and then I've got a couple of things I just want to raise. So if we start, Ms Dale Harris, thank you.
Good morning, sir. My name is Matthew Dale Harris. I'm a barrister instructed by the Council. I have been here at a number of the earlier sessions, but I've been lurking at the back behind Mr Reed. So, this is, as I said to Mr Byrne before, it's an unusual situation for barristers to sit there and not be allowed to talk, but I'm now finally been given my chance. To my left, we've got I think you know them all, Mr Kennedy, Mr Gillespie, and then Ms May. Ms Hope, rather, for the Council. In terms of introductory matters, so I think...
If you just, I mean, obviously, Mr Byrne,
I'll pop that, stop that.
We'll sort of have the formal introduction, and as Mr Byrne just remind me of the sites you're bothered about, and then you're probably bothered about all of them, but which site you had to talk about, and then we can get into the introductory matter. Thank you.
Shall I introduce myself? So, yeah, Matt Byrne. I'm representing Better Homes Enfield and EnCaf Land Use Working Group today and this afternoon. This morning, the sites we're interested in is the first one, Brimsdown Sports Ground, and then not the next. Well, we're interested in all of them, as you quite rightly say, sir. But the next one is Alma Estate, which is currently 4th on the agenda, and also Green Street, which is 5th on the agenda currently.
Okay, thank you. So we'll move the agenda around slightly. We'll do 01 first, then 10, then 12, then come back to 2 and 5. We'll do that, and then so you can depart. So yes, sorry, Mr. Dale Harris. Are there things you wish to raise with me then? Yeah.
So I think you would have received last week an email to the programme officer providing some points of clarification ahead of this week's sessions. That details an updated position in relation to several sites. Broadly, there are 3 categories. There are some sites which have been completed, building out of the sites has been completed. So in relation to those, the Council's position is going to be that they no longer need to be included as allocations. Those sites, that's ERB 4, ERB 31, and ERB 35. Then, so there are some sites which are either no longer being, well, for various reasons, but principally normally that they're no longer being promoted for development, where the allocations are no longer supported by the Council. Those are ERB 1, so the first site on our list, ERB 19, ERB 36, and ERB 34, although that's a slightly different reason, which we'll come to in due course. And then there are a couple of sites where the Council's identified a need to make some changes, at least to the policies themselves, and those are ERB 3 and ERB 28. I anticipate as well, so that there will be a number of sites where we're discussing expectations in terms of delivery and so forth, and that there will be a number of points that emerge from that, but we haven't set those all out at this point.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I did want to pick up on that as one of my points. Yes, just for the benefit of obviously Mr. Byrne and any interested parties watching, I did receive an email. You'll recall that several weeks ago I was surprised, shall we say, by a couple of changes that had been made post-hearing statement submission, which were sort of factual things which should have been picked up in the hearing statement, and so asked the council to inform me, pre-warn me of anything like that. So the council have done that, albeit you say, I think the email was sent to Annette last week, but I wasn't available on Friday, and then obviously unpacking, travelling, and site visiting yesterday, so I only was able to digest it last evening. Obviously, it's too late to have been submitted and put on the examination website. I'm happy and content that it's not going to prejudice anyone's interest, because clearly we're here to talk about this, and the council can explain their position on these, so there's no prejudice there. Slightly, I would imagine, for the people obviously who are attending, would have been helpful to have that information sooner rather than later, because then they could have at least been aware of the changes. And I imagine, at least particularly this afternoon, there is a couple of sites where the council has changed its position, where the people coming could have a view on that, but at least there will still be an opportunity to talk about it. And we'll obviously, when we get to the sites, we'll talk about the council's reasoning, whether or not it's valid and justified, and so on and so forth. So that's fine. But it's not fine. So we'll talk about why it's taken till now on some of these things to alert me to changes. I'll be interested in the council's reasoning for that. Bear with me 1 second. Just on another point about the programme, clearly this week is likely to be different to some of the other weeks, in that it should be less intensive, he said, hopefully. I've probably said this quote before, but to quote, no plan survives first contact with the enemy, and no examination programme survives first contact with interested parties, councils, and everything else. And so the way this programme was set up this week was intended that today was going to be when people who said they wanted to attend, we could group all those sites together, and then the rest of the sites we could deal with hopefully very quickly, because no one would be here and we could rush through those. And as it's turned out, quite a lot of people have dropped out for today, and we've got a couple of people who've suggested they want to come on later sessions. It's not, so it looks a little bit disjointed, but the original plan was sensible, I think. But now, just so people are wondering why we're dealing with these sites today when they're sort of out of order and everything else, that's the reason. But for reasons, obviously, everyone's entitled to drop out if they want to. There's no requirement to be here, but it does mean that I was expecting more people to come. I think we've got a few more this afternoon. But that's why it is as it is. Today, I will, as I've already said, we'll be splitting it up into two parts, because we have got people who come in at 2 o'clock. It was too late to really sort of messing people. That's the other problem, obviously, when you start changing the programme at late stages. You don't want to mess people around too much. So we will split today up into 2 sessions. It might well mean that we finish quite early this morning and then finish early this afternoon. But tomorrow and Thursday, I will try and run through the day's agenda. I won't split it into, we'll roll forward, which again might mean we finish a little bit earlier. I'm sure no one's going to mind too much about that, as we can all go off and do all the work. But what I won't do, because obviously there might still be people who wish to watch online, is roll Thursday into Wednesday. Because obviously, again, if people are expecting us to talk about a particular site on Thursday and they want to see that, then it wouldn't be fair necessarily for me to have changed the programme. Although the website does say keep an eye on the programme, it's quite late in the day to do that. And besides, we've got enough sites to be getting on with, I think. So even though discussions should be a little bit quicker. And obviously, the other thing that I couldn't have anticipated is that there are certain things with these sites that are common. So by now we've discussed some of the things I would have expected to discuss, probably skip over, because it'll be the council be aware of my views on a particular thing, and they'll be away already working out potential changes, so there's no need to necessarily labour points too much in that regard. So hopefully that's all that explained. Unless there's anything else, then I will move on to. We'll start with. Is that okay? Is that everything? One thing, sorry. Yeah. So we'll start then with URB 01 Brimsdown Sports Ground. So as you said, we rather than go through the questions that I prepared. This is one of the sites where the council has indicated to me that it may be wishing to change its position. So I think just to save some time, it might be useful if you just, what is, why you're changing, what position is being changed and why, and we'll take it from there.
Thank you, sir. I mean, essentially, so the council's concluded that the allocation of the site is not sound. That's something that's a decision that's been reached, a view that's been reached following discussions with the council's property services department, who are the council is the landowner of the site, regarding the likelihood of the site's allocations delivery. Council as planning authority is not confident in that delivery. There are complicated leasehold complications which are ongoing, and there are also significant national and local policy implications. It's local green space, and although it's disused at the present time as a sports facility, there's a history of pitch provision on that site. The council, having thought that essentially an allocation was the way to ensure some provision, some retention of community uses and pitches, is now not confident of that position, and so doesn't think that an allocation as set forward would be sound.
Okay. Obviously, let's just go back to first principles. The plan is submitted on the basis that the council thinks it's sound. We're not supposed to be rewriting the plan as we go through, unless it's necessary to make the plan sound. The position on the leases and national policy and so on would presumably have been understood when the site was allocated in the first place. So what's changed since, and I won't say what's changed since the hearing statements were submitted, 6-7 weeks ago, but what's changed, so, which is one thing, because obviously there's no indication of any of this in the hearing statements. And I have to say again, the point of the hearing statements is to highlight things like this. I mean, otherwise, what is the point? So what's changed? But let's put that to one side. What's changed since the plan was submitted that would mean that all of those things that were presumably known are no longer, the decision has changed, if you like.
So, in relation to policy, there's obviously ongoing work, as you're aware, so in relation to the playing pitch strategy. Now, I know that's not a document that's before you because there's no finalised document, but that, sir, is part of the council's ongoing consideration of of need for playing pitches, essentially, across the site. So that's part of the context. There's also been further discussions between the planning authority and property services about the lease negotiations, which have revealed further issues. So, but that's the evolving position. Further discussion and then further work on playing pitch need.
When it comes to delivery, obviously slightly different, except it's different to the council as the landowner here, but actually it should make it easy to deliver, shouldn't it? Because quite a lot, we're talking about sites and local plans where the council, well, it's a private landowner, either willing or not willing to deliver the plan. And then they're obviously, if they're not willing, council may well, as it has with Cruise Hill, for example, and under the site, and Chase Park, it's been alluded to as well, there's always the potential for the council to go down the CPO route. Now, of course, it's not the CPO, its own land, that's silly, but the logic being that if this is council-owned land, then, and the council's plan, this is the council's plan, it's the vision for the city, for the borough, then clearly logic dictates that if it can't deliver on its own land, how can it deliver anywhere? So, shouldn't it be the case here that the local plan is driving the vision and then the estates, if you like, is delivering that vision? Or is it that, to all intents and purposes, the landowner is dictating what the plan says? And if that is the case, then how does that relate to some other sites I might point to where, if you like, the landowner has now decided that it's not deliverable or shouldn't be delivered?
So, I mean, I think the policy context is key to that. Yes, there are deliverability concerns, but those are concerns that we have in the context of the policy position. It's not, I wouldn't accept so that this is something where the choice is being driven entirely by the landowner. But so that is part of the balance in terms of deciding whether or not the site is deliverable and appropriate.
And the policy context being that it's required for open space rather than housing.
And it's local green space, so yes.
Now, just to double check, when are we talking, it's defined as local, like as in PPG, MPPF local green space, or
yes.
just it's a local green space?
Yes, so it's designated local green space.
When was that designated?
I'll pass over to Mr. Kennedy on that one.
Thank you, sir. I believe that designation has been carried over from the previous development plan.
I'm just going to read what's in the site topic paper for URB1. Available site in the urban area. Sites within the urban area will be required to help deliver the council's housing targets. Sites located in a sustainable location has no absolute or environmental constraints. No absolute or environmental constraints. So it didn't occur to anyone that a local green space designation, which is akin to greenbelt, would be a constraint. I mean, as far as I know, and admittedly I've not gone back to the SA and looked at this, so that's something I can do, but as far as I know, until now, nobody has told me that that site is designated as local green space. So I would be interested to understand how it's got to, it says whilst the site has a current local open space designation, which is different, because an open space designation is, it could be, it's public open space. That's not the same as local green space. Local green space is not an open space designation, it's something different to that. So it's not currently accessible and therefore does not offer any amenity recreation benefits to residents. The site has potential for some open space to be made accessible to the public again through redevelopment. So there's nothing there about it being about local green space. So how has it got to, I'm sort of slightly incredulous that it's got to this point, and I'm only just finding out about that now. It's not my job to go searching through the current local plan. I'm not examining the current local plan, the current policies map and seeing what it says on there. I'm examining what's in front of me, and it's allocated for housing. And you've said it's a suitable site, and at no point it's gone, oh, well, actually, it's effectively greenbelt. That's not great. And also, I'm not sure there's been any discussion in this plan about local green space designations. I don't think there's any policy that relates to actual local green space as defined in the framework. So it's this is all new to me.
So we may have to come back to you on the chapter and verses to the designation. Is local green space?
Check your hearing statements, well, make sure I've not missed anything in that. So it says the site contains a designated local open space. So can we just be clear that a local open space is not the same as local green space? Because I think that's fundamental.
That is correct, sir, and that is, in policy terms, they are not the same thing. We're just checking. I'm afraid I just understood it was local green space, but I'm just making absolutely sure via Mr. Kennedy that that's the case.
So we'll just say, obviously, if it's local open space and that's an open POS, if you like, then clearly the questions I would have asked is, have you done an assessment in line with national policy that suggests that the site is surplus to requirements or has been replaced, etc. Those tests. If it's local green space, that's a completely different set of circumstances, which I'm unaware of. So.
Yeah. So if it helps for clarification, the adopted proposals map identifies it as local open space, and the proposed policies map identifies it as local open space.
So that's not local green space?
Yes, local open space.
It's going to be extremely helpful. I'm sorry to be grumpy first thing in the morning, but to be accurate about these things, because clearly they are different things. Because local open space, we can go through that, and you can tell me that you've done an assessment now, and through this work that's been done, and it's not before me yet, 'cause it's not complete, but the emerging work suggests that from an open space perspective, you've reassessed it, and it's no longer surplus to requirements, and that's something that's changed, and that might well be justification for what you're now saying. Coming and telling me it's local green space is very different, and because we have to be, obviously, Mr. Dale Harris, words matter in this context, and so it's slightly, I'm sure that's what you've been told.
Indeed, so I apologise. I mean, I think I'm hesitant because I'd understood it was local green space, and that was what I was putting forward, and so I absolutely apologise. I think it may be that I'm incorrect on that. But I would, sir, in a sense, it's difficult to go ahead with anything further I have to say on it without confirming that point. I wonder, sir, if we could have an adjournment for just a few minutes so that I can discuss with officers and make sure exactly where we are. Yeah,
maybe, because we need to be accurate with why. I mean, it might all amount to the same reasons for why you no longer consider the site to be livable. Yeah. But clearly, as I say, even the concept of LGS in this plan is new. That was news to me. Yeah. And you shouldn't actually need it because you've got MOL, which is the same thing. So it's never even crossed my mind, rightly or wrongly. Yeah. So we'll take so it's 10 minutes. Is that? Yeah.
That would be very helpful.
We'll come back. We'll make it 10:05. We'll come back at 10:05. Luckily, we've got plenty of time today. So thank you. Okay, we'll make a start then. So, as I said before, this might not alter the outcome in particular, but it's important that the context is understood, because otherwise we could be barrelling down some misunderstandings, and my report needs to be accurate. So, confirm situation.
Indeed, sir, and I must start by apologising profusely. I should have identified that there isn't a policy protecting local green space in the plan, so there isn't a local green space designation. That was incorrect. It is local open space and protected as such. In relation to where we are on the evidence, I've asked Mr. Brown to join to the table, Mr. Luke Brown, who I think you have heard from before as well through the examination. So I've asked him just to comment and update you on where the emerging evidence, admittedly outside of the examination, but where that has got to in relation to the need for playing pitches.
Thank you. Luke Brown. I was here for the earlier sessions at stage 1. In terms of the play pitch strategy, it is emerging. It was commenced back in October last year. It's looking at both winter and summer sport provision. It's looking at all public accessible pitch provision, including those no longer in use. The initial findings are that there is a deficit for both informal and formal pitch provision within Enfield. And due to this, the strategy is looking to seek to remain to protect existing pitches and also identify improvements to those sites where there is, say, abandonment or they're vacant at the moment. A way to do this, and this is what the study is starting to recommend, is to actually look at improving existing council assets where it can, disused assets. And this is really to enhance the delivery of those. They're already there, the land is there effectively, and it should be a priority for council assets that are disused to be being brought back into use. The other option obviously is via new development as well through contributions, but because we have a number of sites in Enfield where there are existing pitches that are disused. That is something that the play pitch is now looking at. It's also recommending in those circumstances that action plans are put together, so that you can look at what improvements are necessary, when they can come forward, what's the funding situation like, and when they could be delivered as well. And that's something the Estates and Parks team are working with us on. So that's why there's a couple of these sites that effectively the situation has changed, just because this evidence is now starting to feed through. That's obviously impacting decisions at the commercial side in terms of the Estates and Open Space team. And we've been meeting them to discuss situations on some of these locations. But in particular, in terms of the pitch provision, it's football and cricket where we are at a particular deficit, and that's something that, as I said, the pitch provision and the strategy is looking to improve in the future.
Thank you. As you say, this evidence isn't before me. No criticism there. It's obviously not everything will be before me, not everything's finished. But do you have a timescale for when that work's going to be finished?
Yeah, we're aiming for October. The summer sport information is coming through now. We've got a couple of meetings in a few weeks just to finalise those figures. And then the action plan and the recommendations should be prepared in September with a final document October.
Okay, thank you. And just going back to the plan, maybe it might be for you to answer, one of your team to answer. The policy, as I understand it for this site, again, if we start from the basis the plan is sound and why it's not sound, it does say the site could be appropriate to provide renewed community uses alongside a limited amount of other enabling uses such as housing. So, and I think when you read the wording of the policy, it does imply, and I think it's been suggested already, that the purpose of this allocation, if you is to facilitate pitch provision. So, bearing in mind what you've just said about delivering enhancements, and that there may be situations where some of it could, you could deliver enhancements through enabling, call it enabling development. Would this site not fall into that category then?
The problem is the majority of site is pitch provision, and 225 homes would use quite a significant portion of that. But yes, it could potentially enhance some of the space, but you would effectively be losing some of the pitch provision on site. And the recommendation from Sport England, again, speaking through this, a strategy is to protect existing spaces from development and bring them back into use through, because this is a council-owned site. I think it was the fact that it had the opportunity to be brought back into use as a pitch through funding or action plans, whereas obviously when you're looking at new development, you can provide new pitches as part of that, and that can be more bespoke. But because this is an existing asset, the discussions was to keep it as it is.
Okay, thanks. Let's turn in then. I might come back to some of these points, but just looking at the consequences, if you like. If the plan was, if the site were to come out of the plan, what, if any, consequences are there for strategy, delivery, so on and so forth?
So, well, there would be some units obviously would need to come out of our trajectory at what we anticipate delivering. We'd say so that we are still trying to provide as many homes as we can within the urban area, and it perhaps adds to the need for some other sites there, but that's not, we're following the evidence on each individual site as it comes. I don't think we anticipate having to allocate additional sites, but it obviously goes to that overall case that you have for why we need to release greenbelt land.
going back to first principles, if say, obviously I need to think about all of this, but also need to think about whether the site was sound in the first place, and obviously how you went about allocating the site in the first place might have some bearing on this new stuff. So, it was designated as local open space. It would seem that the policies map, the new policies map, would be somewhat inaccurate if it's allocated and also local open space, but that would be something to be looked at. When allocating the site in the first place, had there been, as per paragraph 103 of the framework, an assessment which clearly shows the open space, buildings or land to be surplus to the requirements, or that the loss would be replaced by equivalent or better provision, or, and I guess the development is for alternative sport and recreation provision, benefits of which clearly outweigh the loss of the current form of use. Now, I'm assuming, from what you've said, it might have fallen into that category, as in you are delivering some open space or playing pitches, and the housing would be enabling that, and that would be better than what would appear to be an accessible open space. So what? Yeah, I suppose what kind of assessment was carried out in the first place to justify it?
Yes, I don't understand that there was any assessment available to show that it was surplus to requirements at that point. So it was, the case essentially was a 103C case, as you've anticipated, sir. I think the point I'd make, sir, is that there's a planning judgment in there. There's a planning judgment to be made, and the evidence of need or deficiencies more broadly has emerged through the evidence that Mr. Brown's been discussing. So that's really changed the planning equation. But yes, in answer to your question, those are the answers.
Okay. Just one thing I'm going to want the council to do, and obviously we've again, I'd have to go through all my notes on the back of this, and I'm sure the council was, is whether or not this has any implications for any other site we've been talking about, or any site we're going to be talking about. We have touched on sites where there are effects on sport and recreation, such as golf courses and things. Now, what I don't know is, because I haven't got that, whether it even falls into the category of this work and is relevant. But I think, these sort of revelations need to be looked at in the round. It might have a particular implication for this site, but I would want to understand at some point whether or not or how it might affect other sites. So I think an action for the council would be to provide, if in the next 2 or 3 days we come across sites where this is relevant, then we can pick it up, obviously. But there may be sites where, for whatever reason, I wasn't informed about this, or it wasn't brought up, and maybe they're not relevant. But I think I'd want to just be sure of that. That if we've talked about loss of open space or playing pitches, then how the emerging evidence would affect that, if at all.
Yes.
And then I would anticipate, not that I like, as I've said to your colleague, Mr. Reid, I'm swimming in paperwork, and I don't necessarily encourage a lot more paperwork, but I think when the strategy is completed in October, then that should be before me. And then if there are any further questions on the back of that, then I'll deal with it then.
Thank you, sir. Certainly take that away. In terms of sites coming up, so I think the only one which there's a potential relevance to is the leisure centre site. It's slightly different kind of provision and different kind of point, but we'll obviously address that when we come to it tomorrow.
Okay. So that's that. Just going to see if there are any other points I wanted to pick about principle. I mean, I will just say in your, again, looking at whether or not how this fits into the, and it might be that I can't really come to a view on this site until I've seen that pitch strategy and the actions and so on, and maybe even provide the interested party the opportunity to comment as well, because it is a significant change. There may well be people, no doubt, who will be quite content with removing the site from the plan, but there may be other implications. So, your hearing statement, it goes back to say the allocation proposes a reduced development footprint to retain the majority of the open space, ensuring no net loss and compliance with London Plan Policy G4. So your hearing statement, you're saying, I'm not trying to contradict, but you were saying, obviously, 225 dwellings would be too much and would reduce too much the playing pitch, but actually your hearing statement suggests that there'd be no net loss. So if that is the case, then could the allocation not be compatible with the playing pitch strategy? I was going back to that same point, but I'm only going on what your hearing statement says. And just for, it's paragraph 2 of the hearing statement. It says, site contains a designated local open space, a factor that has been fully considered in the policy and site capacity assumptions. The allocation proposes a reduced development footprint to retain the majority of the open space, ensuring no net loss and compliance with London Plan Policy G4. So, if I go back to what you were saying, it again doesn't imply that there should be any particular issue with delivering the housing and delivering the open space, notwithstanding leasehold issues or anything else or what property services are. But from a pure policy point of view, I could read all these things together, and if and say, well, because let's just put to one side your change of position. If I'd have been, obviously, I was going to be concerned about the impact on open space. You'd be telling me, well, it's a 103C. We can deliver open space improvements by also delivering the housing. Tick. We can deliver no net loss. Apparently, tick. According to your hearing statement, tick. It sounds like you're getting the benefits of renewed, improved open space and the benefits of 225 dwellings. So, again, going back to what's changed, you've then told me this morning that, well, actually 225 dwellings would reduce the open space too much. So I'm a bit confused about, well, why is paragraph 2 wrong then?
I think it's just when we were doing the hearing statements, the play pitch, the discussions on that weren't emerging. The strategy hadn't emerged as much. So since then, we've been having discussions with colleagues, with Sport England, with the consultants who are doing that work. And effectively what they're telling us now is that, to develop part of that site and retain a bit of the site for open space, it would be difficult to achieve the policy effectively from their perspective when you're looking to retain that site as a play pitch. It's quite a significant area. It is underused, but it's at the moment is informal space. It's not. I don't know whether you've been on site or not, but it is. There's goalposts on there. People clearly use it, but it's not a formal space at the moment. And it's just when discussing the particular site with the consultants, it would be difficult to achieve the policy and retain the open space.
Difficult to achieve the housing policy.
Yeah. I think, you could do that, but you would have a significant loss of open space when you look at achieving that policy requirements. The 225, with the sort of the density in the area, you would lose quite a significant. I think that was the main concern, effectively. And because there is now a kind of a deficit in that area, that position we feel has changed. Whereas a few months ago, these discussions weren't underway at this time, particular sites. It was more broad kind of principles and things. So now we're getting into the site detail. Things are starting to change with the discussions.
Okay. I understand the world doesn't stop. I understand the world doesn't stop just because the local plan's in examination, but sorry to be precise about it, the hearing statement, sorry to repeat myself, clearly says the allocation produces a reduced development footprint to retain the majority of the open space, ensuring no net loss. So what you're telling me now is that paragraph 2 is wrong. You can't deliver no net loss of open space and the housing. You see, I could argue that irrespective of the discussions you've been having with Sport England and property service and everything, you would have known whether or not you could deliver 225 houses on the site and a net loss of, or no net loss at the time. That's sort of irrelevant to discussions. So I don't understand why, when the hearing statement was written, you would be telling me that there'd be no net loss of open space if that wasn't true. So that was just wrong.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the boundary of the site and the green space on there, I don't know how you would achieve not a net loss of space when you're delivering 225 homes. It would be a significant reduction in open space. So, yeah, that statement is incorrect.
Mr. Kennedy.
Thank you. So maybe I can just add a bit of context on the capacity and how we reached it as well. So I think it's worth just stepping back to the original call for sites, so submitted by the council as freeholder, but with no proposal. There have been a few proposals over the years, various densities and footprint on that local open space as well, which I think 2 or 3 come to mind. Our calculation for this site assumed that 60% of the site would be retained as local open space. So that was just applying our typology assumption on that site. And then with a kind of larger portion of that for some kind of re-provided community or social infrastructure use, which you can see on the inset map at the centre of the site with the blue hatch. So I think, coming into the production of the plan, we always assumed that there would be some reduction here. There are good design reasons to do that, overlooking of that space, kind of protecting those back gardens, looking onto it as well, creating new routes through the site. But as Mr. Brown has said, there's been, I guess, new things have come to light that, again, there's a lot of proposals on this site. It's unclear, even with our assumptions, what the true capacity is and how to balance the different needs for this site.
Sorry, I'm thinking. So it's not insignificant to remove a site of 225 dwellings in an area where there are, shall we say, you're seeking to maximise housing development outside the greenbelt. You're going into the greenbelt. You're looking to maximise capacity. It's a serious issue to remove a site, I think, particularly one of that scale. And I understand that things have moved on, and so, but I suppose what I don't understand is the purpose of this policy was clearly to deliver what I'm being told is meant to be delivered. So I'm slightly, okay, it might be a purely quantitative issue. There's a quantitative deficiency of playing pitches. You can provide a quantitative improvement on here. It sounds like originally we were talking about a qualitative improvement. So you deliver the housing, you deliver less open space, but there'd be a qualitative improvement, which actually would still possibly be in line with national policy. There's no, and may well still be in line with national policy, because I'm slightly blind because I've not seen this other evidence. I am again perturbed, for want of a better word, by the fact that the hearing statement has told me something which isn't correct. It's not the first time. I don't really want to have to interrogate these things for sort of factual statements. If the council are telling me there'd be no net loss of open space in the hearing statement, I really ought to be taking that at face value. And that's why it didn't sort of make sense, what you're saying about, well, we can't deliver the housing because you're delivering no net loss. That's what you told me. So, but if that's not true, then it's just sort of wasting my time reading them, aren't I, to be a certain extent, because they're not helping me. But we'll leave that there. I'll just implore the council when we're doing stage 3 MIQs just to take more care about this sort of thing.
Thank you, sir. That's noted. And again, my apologies.
Okay, Mr. Byrne.
Thank you, sir. I know this site fairly well. Visited it again the other day. So when we say there's informal access, I think that informal access would involve you jumping over a security fence, because it's very well protected. It's been derelict for many years and fenced off from the local community. I've spoken to people down there lots of times and none of them access it. It's a site of antisocial behaviour. People do break in and burn things down from time to time, but it's not really usable by the local community in any sense whatsoever, really, of a normal way of speaking. It's not just been playing pitches in the past, it's also been nurseries and orchards and things like that. It's not listed in the Blue and Green Strategy audit at all as an open space. And in fact, in that area, it doesn't even list a deficit of open space. That area is particularly, just that little area there is particularly well serviced by parks and by playing pitches, actually, with Durant's Park nearby, Albany Park nearby. So it is, I accept that in the east of Enfield to the southeast there is an issue, and we've brought up the lack of playing pitch strategy from Meridian Water and the problems we see there, but this is not the same. This is a different area of the east of Enfield. So I don't really understand where that's coming from. In terms of re-provision of pitches, as I understand it, there was 1 or 2 pitches before, and some informal pitches. If you're talking about redeveloping the site and just having football pitches, you're talking about 10 to 17 football pitches, 10 full-size football pitches, 17 sort of normal size, if you like. This is not needed. There's a lot of pitches in that area. I know we're waiting to see the playing pitch strategy, but it's simply not correct, in my view, to say that that area needs an additional 17 football pitches or the equivalent thereof. And we know this quite well because we're natural defenders, EnCaf, Land Use Working Group, are natural defenders of open space and public open space. So we know quite a bit about the site and how it's been closed off from public use, and the leaseholder and the council's freehold position. So I find it very surprising that it's coming out, because our view was that it could be developed for adequate reprovision of playing pitches, as it says in the policy itself, as well as reprovision of open space, and actually more like 500 homes, which is what the evidence says. It says it in your HELA, it says it in your transport assessment, assesses it as a site at delivering more than 500 homes. And indeed, when you look at it and look at a reasonable density on that site, you can easily get to 500 homes. And there is some reasonable density as well in the existing area to the west. So I have to say I sort of feel a bit... I just don't really understand your position here at all. I mean, we want to see this space brought back into use. It's a fantastic site. It's over 8 hectares. It's been closed off for years. We need more housing. We're not making housing targets. I'm sorry. I'm just a bit sort of knocked sideways by it not coming forward, if I'm honest, because the benefits are so obvious, and the evidence just doesn't, in my view, reflect what I've been listening to today.
Thank you. I mean, obviously, we're all slightly in the dark without the playing pitch strategy. But still, so we may unfortunately have to come back to this one at some point in the future. But is there anything you want to respond to for now?
So if it helps, I think it was a very finely balanced planning judgment in relation to the site. I think the council are concerned around the uncertainty associated with the emerging evidence in terms of the playing pitch strategy work, and also in relation to the leaseholder issues, and came to the view, as has been said, that perhaps it ought not to be allocated. But as I say, it was a very finely balanced planning judgment for some of the arguments that have been mentioned by Mr. Byrne and some of the questions you've asked, sir.
The leaseholder issue, I don't know the detail of that, but if this was, there are again other sites in the plan with leaseholders on them, and some of those might be pushed back into later periods of the plans. That's not necessarily insurmountable. And again, the council own the land, so we're not talking about, as I said before, if anyone can deliver the council's local plan vision, then it should be the council. And the council is land. I understand, a landowner elsewhere on allocated sites, and isn't suggesting they can't be delivered either. Some of those will have tenants on them, no doubt. So, is the leaseholder issue really that insurmountable?
Not necessarily insurmountable, sir, but just creates further uncertainty in relation to deliverability alongside the evidence on the playing pit strategy. And
let's work on the basis that the plan is sound for the moment, because I've not come to a view on that. The 225, presume from what you've said, would be pushed back into the 10 plus years anyway. So we're talking about, as with many sites, that again, there's a lot of sites seemingly where delivery is uncertain. So it's no different to some of those sites, is it, in that respect?
No different, other than in this particular case, the emerging playing pit strategy will have some relevance to the suitability of the proposed allocation.
Okay. Probably can't go any further. When we come to do the updated trajectory, and I'll probably issue a note on this at some point because it's not going to just be relevant to this site. What I want to make sure is that obviously everything that's in the trajectory will be without prejudice. So the trajectory should at least reflect, I think, the council's thinking on sites. So there are sites we've talked about where the council has accepted, I think, that the capacity might go up because it reflects planning permissions or vice versa. I know there's a site, one of the retail Meridian water sites, I think, where you've gone away because there are parcels that weren't included, which might increase the capacity, so which I need a response on. So the trajectory should reflect those figures. This site should still be listed in the trajectory, but perhaps with an asterisk next to it, and it might be 0 from what the council's. But obviously it needs to be in there because I need to be, and then with brackets 225. So I understand. So it's all very clear. So if a site's allocated in the plan for 500, but you've come to the view it's 750, and that should say it'd be 750 brackets 500. So at least now I'm doing the maths, I can work it all out, and it's all very clear. Because obviously, it won't be until after we've had those discussions probably that I'm in a position to conclude whether these sites are in, out, or sound, not sound. And so I need to understand the effect, if you like, of removing this site. But I want it still listed in the trajectory because obviously I won't have concluded it's not sound. And I can work out myself the scenarios where if the site is in. The other thing will be, of course, there'll be some sites maybe, and I'll probably go with this again on Thursday, but while it's relevant, while it's in my mind, it's unlikely my feedback on stage 2 will be sort of, definitive, these sites are in, these sites are out, because clearly there's still things to talk about in stage 3 which are relevant. But it might be that I say, well, there's some sites where the council have decided to go, we don't think that capacity is accurate, we want to change that, fine. That should go in. I can think about that. But there might be some sites I feed back and say, well, I think, for the sake of the trajectory, without prejudice of whether the site's in or out, I think from what discussions, capacity should be this, and that should go in the trajectory. It might mean the site goes out at some point, or something else changes, or it reverts back to the plan, whatever. But the trajectory should be, so that's what I'll probably feed back on. But it does need to be very clear. So where sites have come out, including probably sites which, I suppose, sites which had possibly been suggested to be removed because they're complete. Obviously, they're in the trajectory anyway as completions. That's fine, but they do need to be listed as sort of an allocation, so I can tally it all together. And where there's a permission, which is also an allocation, it needs to be clear for me to be able to, because sometimes you get trajectories where it's listed as a permission, but I don't know that it's allocated as, URB 01, there's no allocation on it, and it just so that sort of thing. So that was a bit of a digression, but I think, while I'm thinking about it, it's probably just worth highlighting that.
So I think we could have a notes column or something on the detailed trajectory so that you can see whether it's an existing consent or whether we've had a discussion where we've proposed an alternative capacity. So hopefully that will all be clear for you.
And as I say, I think where the council has suggested the capacity, I mean, I might not accept it in the fullness of time, and I'll advise on that. I might say, well, no, that was wrong, or I don't think that was right. But I think it should be what the council position is and any additional feedback I provide, where I think capacity might, at least the trajectory should include this capacity for the discussion purposes. But I'll obviously feedback on that between stage 2 and stage 3. Okay, Mr. Bennett, finally, and I want to move, obviously, this has taken longer than I expected, but there's a good reason.
Very quickly, so just to say, our understanding is that some years ago the site had 10 to 15 years running left on the lease, which is not a particularly long time in the context that Kings Oak Equestrian Centre's got 54 years left on the lease. And there's obviously, in the hearing statement made by Rockwell, they're raising a number of significant concerns about the discussions about that lease. So it just feels strange that one's been backed for 54 years, but one that's 10 to 15 is being taken out because you see there's being leasehold issues. It just doesn't stack up to me.
Okay, I don't know if you want to come back on that. No. Okay, we'll leave that there then. Okay, thank you, everyone. That was a bit more prolonged, but I think it's quite important. There's a few important things there. And obviously a lot for me to go away. And I say, it may well be this one's may have to come back to this. We may not, we may. But, all right, so we'll move on then to, where's my agenda? We'll go on to URB 10. Thank you. Thank you. So this is the Alma estate. I don't think this is one where the council is proposing any change. Is that correct?
So we've acknowledged in the matters statement, paragraph 140, that there is indeed a further permission on the site, which results in a higher number. So I think the point being made by Better Homes in Enfield was that the estimated gross capacity reported at footnote 16 of Appendix C, that was based on the existing plan permission at the time that the plan was drafted. There is, in fact, a further permission which provides for a net additional 188 dwellings, so we accept that factually. We don't, I think, object to the approximate estimated housing capacity being increased to reflect that. And there's also a point, so I think the point being made by Better Homes Enfield, the second point is that that net figure shouldn't take account of the demolitions that have taken place on the site in order to deliver the development. We say it is appropriate to give a net figure. The net figure there, I think, includes the total demolitions on the site. We're already taking out the 330 that have already been delivered. So there is an additional adjustment that will need to be made to make sure we're only counting, when reducing what we expect to get out, the demolitions on the remaining phases. So we're comparing apples with apples, essentially.
Right.
But that's the only point. So we'll need to update what we think the estimated capacity is to reflect that.
Okay. It's a bit confusing because you've got, I think, so the main thing is I think that the plan it could reflect somewhere, I suppose. Again, I've said, sorry, I'm like a stuck record on if a traditional way of setting this out, you would have had the policy, and then in this supporting text you might have said, well, there's permission for X, and some of these have been delivered. And so we're only looking at the number relates to, be very clear what the number relates to, and it's what's left to be delivered, even though the site might well have, so where you said the estimated great capacity of 1,200, the policy only relates to the remaining phases, and that's a net increase of. So you're saying the net increase in that respect would be 198, is that?
There's an additional 198.
Additional 198 left. So the 127 should be updated to 198.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Now, Better Homes, Mr. Byrne, sorry, you'll no doubt explain yourself, but I think it says that there's still 971 to be delivered. So is that do you recognise that number and how that fits into the overall picture?
Yes, sir. The numbers, I think, Mr. Kennedy may be best placed to deal with these, but the
Sorry, yeah, and then there's also, the 327,
yeah.
some of which presumably has been delivered.
Sorry, I've just realised I'm looking at my Green Street notes, hence. You do have to agree with the numbers.
Thank you, sir. So just to give you some context on this site itself, take a few steps back. So there was permission granted for an outline scheme several years ago. So it was submitted in 2015, but I think consent was granted in 2017. That was for 993 homes across the site. 2019, there was a variation to that permission, which uplifted the capacity to 1080. And the most recent permission, which was given resolution to grant earlier this year, I think, I have the note here, to be precise, in March, that brought that up, the totality of the site to 1402. So as you can see, there has been a general increase in that capacity across the site over the years. It's been almost a decade in production, I guess. I think just why that, I'll get to the numbers in a minute, but why that number has increased, it is truly just the evolution of development in Enfield. So going from an outer London borough, which is mainly sees itself as a suburban 2 to 3 cars per household place, to somewhere where the London plan is taking into place. Parking standards are becoming lower for houses. So through this process of uplift, essentially it has been a low-hanging fruit of we don't need to provide as much car parking on this site, so we can provide, we're getting rid of entire roads from the scheme that aren't required. So there's a lot of opportunity here for true optimisation of this site, and so that's what's behind this increase in capacity over the years, which has been sizable. In terms of the numbers delivered, I think we will need to get back to you on the exact numbers on the homes that, so for instance, like we have many phases across the site, how many existing homes have been taken out for phase 1 to be delivered and how to marry those up. We just need a little bit more time to just get that back to you exactly, if that's required, and it's something we want to just provide to you anyway. In terms of the capacity, we have been working. The scheme is progressing, and I think that number, the 331 number, which we've assumed in our net calculation, has already delivered, will have changed due to the passage of time and the construction of some of the phases on the site, which have had residents move into this year, or last year, sorry. And yeah, if there's a follow-up question for clarity, that would be welcome if you need to.
So it's quite confused because again, it's not confused. It's confusing because it's a long plan. Obviously, a site with a long gestation period. Mm-hmm. I mean, some of the figures can be set out in the trajectory. Yeah. So, but clearly, the trajectory is the plan period trajectory. So if anything if permission was granted in 2017, for example, and anything was, there are outlines. I don't know obviously all the backstory of reserve matters and everything. But if anything was delivered before the plan period, which I think is 2019, isn't it? Yep. Then that would obviously be excluded from there. But I need to know what's happened since 2019. I suppose the most logical way of doing this is in the trajectory row. because the allocation covers the entire estate, it should, you know, the ERB 10 row should be the entirety. So it would be what has been delivered, and then perhaps that avoids having lots of rows with lots of, that can go in the notes, all the different permissions, but having a different row for every permission. So look at it in the entirety. If, and I'm just going to use round numbers, the overall capacity is 1,000, you've delivered 750 in the, you know, the plan period so far, it leaves 250, and then the trajectory obviously identifies when you expect that to come forward, which might be 5-year supply or 10-year. That's, we'll talk about it shortly. So really, again, I suppose what we're looking at here is what is the site, you know, it's presumably the allocation is only to determine that what's left if an application were to come in. So, you know, it might be that if the entire site's covered by permissions, this policy never gets triggered. But as we've talked about on some other sites, there might be scope for someone to come back in because it's not all been built out. So you need a policy to, you know, cover that eventuality for revisions and so on. But it's about what's left, I would think. And I think the policy could say, again, actually, as you've got in your footnote, as long as it's clear, I think that you're only talking about net or, you know, what's remaining, and it's not. This is not the gross figure. This is the net net increase figure of what's left, and that's what this site is allocated for. That needs to be clear. It might sound like it might be you need to go away and work out what that number is and come back to it, because I've got 3 or 4 different numbers, and I must admit, a bit lost. But ultimately, you know, if it's based on permissions, and that gives you a fairly clear idea of what the capacity is, and that should be justifiable. Clearly, if someone comes in with a different scheme, it's slightly more, slightly less, so you can deal with it. But yeah, so it should be. So 198 is the figure I've got as being. Sounds like, but so there's different numbers. Yeah. And the hearing statement refers to 327 for the permission, including net additional 190. So is that so? Just the 327, just for my, does that include some demolitions? Then is that the point? Is there any demolition on this site?
Yes. So,
so that's where it comes down to.
Yeah, I think there's total demolitions across the whole of the site is 746.
Yeah, that's correct.
So 746 units lost in total across the site. Our total delivery across the whole site will be 1402. And then we need to update you as to how many units have been delivered already, and also what proportion of the demolitions are accounted for through the delivery of those units.
Yeah, I mean, the trajectory, obviously, this is where it gets a bit complicated. So obviously, the gross figure, and this, I'm sure you'll work it all out and you'll explain to me, but there'll be a gross figure, 1,402. But in terms of, you know, what's meeting your housing requirement, it's obviously only the net increase that's relevant, not the like for like. I mean, it's not unimportant, obviously, all those other things, but and so yeah. Just sorry, I might be contradicting myself now. On the employment sites where we've got this, I think I've suggested that the allocation, the land use requirements should at least, because obviously there's also, I've said that land use requirements will need updating to put the figures into them, because that becomes policy. I think on the housing, on the employment, I've sort of suggested where you've got some intensification, it might be sensible to say what is the gross and net. So gross X incorporating a net increase of Y, so that everyone's on the same, whether that be the case here actually, whether it be, you know, a gross figure of X, net increase of Y.
In the land use requirements.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I suppose when the plan application came in, you'd be looking at the gross figure, seeing, you know, even though it might include demolitions, it'd have a gross figure attached to it, wouldn't it? And then you'd say, but that incorporates X demolition, X renewal. So. But I think, okay, but there's an action there, I think, for a modification to be drafted that covers those points. But I'm going to base it on that it's going to be your understanding of what's currently extant. So at least that's sort of a logical.
It's based on the extant permission.
Yeah. So I don't have to worry too much about that, provided it's accurate.
And so that the recent resolution to grant, that means the entirety of the site is now covered by a detailed application as well. So there's no remainder of the site allocation to be have permission sought for, and the site is well underway in terms of its phased delivery by the contractor and developer on site. So we don't anticipate further applications coming in for this at this stage. And as I say, the evidence base was created using the extant permissions at the time, and the application was submitted, I think, a month after we submitted the plan for examination.
I mean, provide the trajectory. I mean, from an allocation, I suppose there's always a chance until the last house is built, or it's all under literally every single. I mean, is every single plot under construction then now? Would that mean the policy is not? There's two sort of ways of looking at this. No chance the policy is going to be triggered because it's 2/3 of the way built, or it's very little likely of being triggered because they've got permission for everything and probably likely to move on. But yeah, so is it in the latter category?
I think I have to visit site. I have to go back to the site to check if everything is under construction fully. But it is the contractor and the developer is treating the site as one project, and have been quite wanting the application to go through as fast as possible, so that their contractors are lined up for the next phases, and they've got the compound already. They've built their on costs for the site. So I think, without having that information to hand, I don't want to say something that's not true, but we're pretty confident that they want to continue this, and it's a joint venture with the council as well, so it's got that. It's not just the private sector development, it's that kind of both sides working on it. Okay. Well, I suppose there's no risk or little risk in having. I mean, as I said before, the sites which have been built out, or there's a debate to be had whether it's unsound to have a policy for those. It might not be unsound if they're never triggered. Or it's not, it might be that it still might serve a purpose for now if there's still some work to be done. So it's not the end of the world. In terms of delivery, with what you just said, would you consider this to be still in the 5-year supply, or I don't know how many are left to be delivered, so it might straddle 5 years and going into 5 to 10? I think going on the assumption that we're out of the 0 to 5, it would have to be in the 5 to 10 now.
Yeah. But it's still a 5-year supply from now?
Oh, correct, yeah. Sorry.
And so, as you said, the whole site has detailed permissions, so that would fall into the deliverable category in the framework anyway. Okay, thanks. I'm just going to run through very quickly a couple of my points on the actual infrastructure requirements and design principles, though these are all fairly familiar, I think, now. Obviously, we've talked about, because it's a new week and a new session, infrastructure requirements is going to have to be something somewhere. I don't know quite how we deal with this, but it makes it clear, that incorporates the idea of SIL regs. So it's not, none of them, and I think we've got some statements from people who come in this week or today who've pointed this out. So it's that kind of thing where they want that comfort that it's subject to it being necessary and so on. I'm going to also assume that some of these infrastructure requirements are not generic, but are what's come out of the permissions. So such as the reprovision of a community centre, youth centre, they're probably already factored in, one assumes.
That is correct, sir.
Just going to go to notes. And there's the standard, well, almost standard modification that's in E6.1 relating to active travel. Again, I'll come to a view on some of these, I think, at some point. I mean, you've got a policy on active travel, whether you need to write it in every single allocation. It seems possibly not. But then there's lots of things that are in every allocation where it might be possibly not, so there's always that striking a balance. Nothing particularly to say on that. The only thing is on 4 and 5, it does, it's just that, 3 and 4. So should deliver pre-provision of a community centre, should deliver the reprovision of a youth centre. Are they musts, actually? But then when you look at the land use requirements, it does say, and could be supported with social infrastructure uses such as nursery and community space. So it's all a bit, what is it? What's a necessity and what's a could and what's a should?
So it might be worth we review these two asks, as those two uses have already been delivered on site.
Okay, right. Well, fair enough then.
Yeah.
If they've gone, they've gone.
Yeah. But they're in situ and in use.
Well, I think it's the classic case of not justified to ask for that if they've already been built, so and provided. So that's fairly straightforward. They can come out if subject to it being. Good, thank you. And on the again, on the design principles, really, most of these are things we've talked about before. So there'll be sort of provisos about tall buildings, cross-references to DE6 probably. I'm not going to get into the height of 33 metres today. That'll probably be something we generally pick up under DE6 when we look at how it's all been modelled and so on. There's obviously some standard things about how references to overlooking and living conditions are referred to and whether it's appropriate. And then in parking terms, we've got here, should provide limited parking, suggested modifications to minimise parking to be in line with the London plan. This is a PTAL 2 site, so obviously London plan parking standards would be relatively generous. So the question again, I think for the council when it's looking at this, is it looking to exceed London plan parking standards or whichever way around you look at it, as in more stringent than London plan parking standards? Is that what it means when it talks about limited or minimise? Or is it that London plan parking standards are fine? I have no particular axe to grind on this other than making sure the council gets what it wants. And making sure the wording reflects the want. Because in some cases you've got a low PTAL and you've just said car free, and so that's might be reasonable because it's saying we want to go beyond parking standards. In some cases it seems to be low PTAL, but you're quite content to go with the parking standards. Just again, it's being absolutely sure you get what you want. And then the only other thing I would say is, in terms of the information on this, says within protected viewing corridor. It says yes, it's within view 2 and view 9. And there's no reference to that. It might be, again, inferred through references to tall buildings and so on, but there's no references to the viewpoints. So again, if these viewpoints are important enough to identify as a constraint, then one assumes you want to refer to them in policy somewhere. So.
Thank you. So it is in our, I'll have to get the exact reference, but those viewpoints are mapped in our in the DM policies.
Yeah, but I think in terms of the design principles, it's highlighting, I guess, rather like you'd highlight. Right. And also you've got, the other thing is there's reference to a conservation area. So it's to the west of the conservation area and associated statutory listed buildings, to the west of a landscape on a local heritage list. So you've got these features you've highlighted in the table, but there's no specific reference to them in the policy. So I think, if they are, again, it's one of, as we talked about before, not the end of the world. You've got DM policies which would deal with those things, but you've got DM policies which deal with parking. You've got DM policies, but they're referred to in the policy. So if you're dealing with those sort of generic issues, should you be dealing with other generic issues as well? And where something specific like a viewpoint or a heritage asset, then I guess you want to be making it clear what your position is on that. Admittedly, here might be moved because it's already been got permission, but.
Noted. That makes sense. And as you just said, that has been thoroughly tested through the application process and found on balance acceptable.
Yes, it doesn't seem like it's something that can't be addressed, but and I suppose in the unlikely event you get another application, at least you vote, which you would anyway. But I think it's just complete belt and braces things. Okay, Mr. Byrne, have you got any comments?
Thank you, sir. In terms of things like design and layout and so on, the Alma estate is just excellent. The new estate and the regeneration, it's brilliant. Our only real concern here is about where the demolitions have actually been counted. I think the difference between our position and what the council is saying is that we believe, and the GLA has confirmed, that they've all already been counted. So 746 were counted in 2018-19 because the GLA says you have to count demolitions at the start of a project. So it is a bit unusual, but we entered into this in some detail with the GLA, and they're very helpful. And they said, no, and you can actually see it in their reporting, and we've given you the screenshots in our hearing statement to show that those 746 minus figure was counted in 2018-19, and that will feed into the housing delivery test figures. So what we're saying is that it's all upside now, in effect, in the plan period. So the numbers you should be including, I think we agree on the overall numbers and the different applications and so on and so forth. It's just the counting of demolitions, effectively. That happens on a few of the regeneration schemes, but this is the biggest one by far this happens on.
Okay, so I think I understand better now. So the logic being that, yeah, if you started off, if this was the only site in the plan, you'd have started with a deficit. Sorry, no,
outside the plan.
Outside the plan period.
Yeah.
So that would have been accounted for in however it's accounted for, and then so you're starting from zero, if you like, and everything. So the gross you should be counting the gross, not the net, basically.
The gross is the net.
Okay. Okay, sounds like a debate for the trajectory session, as much as anything, but we should at least, particularly if it's lots of sites, if it's a matter of principle, but I suppose we get the view on that now.
Thank you, sir. Yes, I think that there's a difference between what is reported through the completions data gathered by, or the ongoing data gathered by the GLA, and what's the appropriate thing to put in the plan and plan for through the trajectory. Our view is that to meet the requirements of the framework in terms of setting out allocations that meet needs and provide, the net approach is the correct one. As you say, so we're happy to discuss this at the trajectory section, but that is our view, and that's the approach that's been taken through the different policies. It's obviously a little complicated in this case like this, where you've got a scheme that is partly outside the plan and partly within the plan period. But we say that the appropriate and justified approach is to include essentially a net figure that reflects what, if there are different phases coming forward, what each phase actually delivers in terms of net additions.
I mean, from the allocation perspective, it's kind of a moot point, because what you're talking about, the allocation is what's left. And as long as it's all very clear what's being built out or what's, that's one thing. But I think the trajectory is a different debate, and we can probably come on to that. But the point's noted, and I think I probably need to go back into what the London, how GLA look at all these things. In advance of the session. There's always that little quirk, isn't there, of how things are normally done and how things are done in London. Not always the same thing. Okay, but point note. I mean, so ultimately, though, I mean, it is how we count it, but not commenting on the numbers. It's just how they count at the end of the day.
We agree on everything, I think, apart from where the demolitions are counted.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, good. Right, so there's a couple of actions in there. Sorry, I say that. I just noticed one other thing from what you've just said about the 3,800 square metres of estimated non-residential capacity. Then is that gone now? Would that have been the youth centre, or is that something else?
So on the site there is a small parade of shops built into one of the existing blocks, which I believe has been demolished or is under demolition soon, and that's been reprovided in one of the new blocks in a really nice new open street kind of boulevard type area for the reprovided Greggs, for instance. Yeah.
Well, always need one of those.
Sorry. It's that part of that block has been it's spread over a couple of blocks. Two of those have been built. One of them recently finished. Yet to have to go on site to confirm if those new tenants have moved back in. But essentially, yeah, that is an existing use reprovided on site.
Okay. I think just the action, right, I guess, is to make sure the land use requirements are accurate, and so because again, and the implementation tables are, I guess, I say, potentially useful supporting text, but they're not policy. So whether it says 127 in 0 to 5, it doesn't matter that much. But the land use requirements need to be quite clear. And I think here the land use requirements should provide new homes. We should say probably be clear about gross and net and all that, and could be supported with those social infrastructure, so the nursery or community space. If some of these things have already been built out, then you don't need to mention that because it's giving the wrong impression. And then, and again, if the retail, re-provision of the retail local services has already happened, then there's no need to refer to that, and I guess it would come out of the table because it's no longer expecting any more.
Yep, understood.
Okay, thank you. Right, we'll move on then to, what time is it? Oh, we'll have a break, actually. We won't move on. We'll have a break. We'll have another break. I'm determined to eke this out until 12 o'clock. We'll come back at 20 past, so yeah. No, 25 past, we'll have 15 minutes. So come back at 25 past, and we'll move on to the next one. Whichever that is, 12, I think.
Thank you. So just for my note, we're 12 next, and then are we dealing with 2 and 5 after that?
Yeah. Green Street. So it's allocated for 92 dwellings and reprovision of redevelopment of the site should provide new homes and replacement employment floor space with no net loss, which is nice and clear at least. But again, the land use requirement should probably put the minimum in. In terms of, obviously, I'll just ask council general standard questions on these things about status and so on, where we are with it. The numbers are for 92, and it's been put to me that the permission is for 148. So I guess just whether, views on capacity. So status and capacity first things, please.
Thank you, sir. I think I'll ask, is it Mr. Kennedy or Mr. Gaspey, I think, is going to answer this one.
So my understanding is that there is a consent for 148 units, but there was then an application to vary condition 02 to accommodate a second staircase, and the schedule of accommodation submitted by the applicants shows a total of 92 dwellings, which is what's been recorded on the pro forma at Appendix C.
Okay, so in the trajectory then, it would be showing it's 92 rather than 148.
So I think we do need to just double check that, but I understand that's where the 92 has come from. My concern is that might be for just the 2 blocks when the council has added that up, not for a further block, which is block C. So that's where the 92 has come from, blocks A and B. Not for the additional block C. Yeah. So the calculation has come from blocks A and B to get to 92, not A, B and C, which total 148.
So your view is that it should be 148? Okay.
Correct, sir.
Okay. Okay. And again, it would be minimal, I guess. Well, first things first, I suppose the question is it, is permission's been granted since 2020, or, well, sorry, the application was 2020, it was granted, but so there's been some variations to that. So is it under construction, do we know? Is it?
So the site is not currently under construction. I believe that variation was given resolution to grant in, well, the committee date was in July 2023. I don't believe that, if that application is still live, it hasn't been fully signed off then. The other part of that permission was to reduce the amount of affordable housing from 50% habitable rooms to 25%. This development has again, been going on for quite a long time. Obviously, yeah, the permission was obviously granted in 2020 and hasn't been delivered. And the developer has had trouble delivering the site, selling the site to a development partner to build out, also to deliver with that amount of affordable. And that application also covered the second staircase, so trying to resolve that issue as well, because it is a tall building. And I think just what you said earlier about minimum or appropriate, I think given that it's, whilst this area is marked in our plan for transformation, it's a tall building area, and this application has been tested against those criteria and the impact it would have, I think having a minimum would be a bit, wouldn't be wise, given that it's already pushing that boundary. It would be better to keep it as an approximate estimated housing capacity.
Okay, I mean, like I say, I'm not overly.
Sorry, I know you weren't saying one really.
Yeah, I'm not overly precious about those. I think it needs to be clear. I think there are some cases where we talked last week, or last time we were here, about sites where the council maybe was being cautious, understandably cautious, and saying a certain number, and it might be that would be a minimum or a minima. There might be other, and I did say at the time, there might be other cases where you are more certain. That might be up to or approximate. So again, I think it's just making sure the land use requirements are clear about what it is you're actually seeing. Sometimes the language can be different for every site, depending on the context of that site, and that might be perfectly justifiable. And it's just making sure it's all effective. So I have no particular qualms on that. If you think the capacity is 148. And it was approximate capacity 148 based on that permission. So just to confirm, is the permission, even though it's been granted since 2020, there's been variations, is it still extant, or has it lapsed?
I have to double check that for you. Exactly.
It's important, again, I suppose, from a trajectory perspective, and from whether it sits in the 5-year supply category or not. So if it was a full permission, as per the framework, because we were talking about where it sits, if it's a full permission, then it's deliverable, unless there's clear evidence, I think, that it's not deliverable. Unfortunately, you've probably given me some clear evidence that it's not deliverable, so it may well be that whether it's got full detailed permission or not, it sounds like it might be one that's pushed out of the 5-year supply, not a deliverable site. Is that the case?
I think so, yeah.
So 10 plus years. In that final category, so not a deliverable site in 5-year supply terms, but not necessarily not a suitable site. These are not insurmountable issues, perhaps, in the fullness of time. Okay. I'll move on then to the general points. There's not a huge number again. There is some consistency issues in infrastructure requirements, because according to the Reg 22 statement, this is an SPZ and landfill. And again, there's a sort of mixed approach in the plan to how landfill and SPZs or source protection zones, are referred to. Sometimes it's highlighted, sometimes it's not. So consistency issue there. And then obviously the general points about infrastructure requirements. And here again, TfL, or you agree with TfL about the active travel issue, which I will or will not consider necessary. And then in the design principles, everything's pretty much, these are all, I'm not going to pick them up every single time. I'm sure the council's got action, so some of these points you'll know about tall buildings and so on, and things of that nature. The only thing that I did want to pick up on was on, well, not the only thing. On G, no, G's fine because it does talk about flexible, so it's a requirement in the land use requirements for employment space, so that's picked up, so fine. My views on should carefully consider without some kind of outcome. So on I should carefully consider relationship with existing sewer running east-west. To what end? Presumably to avoid some kind of problem, you know, so at least it's understanding when someone's assessing how, you know, yeah, we've carefully considered it, we're just going to put, you know, run a road through it or something like that, you know. Yeah, so, but these are not major issues, just sort of effectiveness points. And then we've got the same point about minimised parking. It's the same point I said before. It's PTAL 2. Well, I should say that. I'm aware that, as we talked about last time, TfL have updated the PTAL requirements, so it may well be, in the fullness of time, you'll provide me with an update on that. It will only be relevant in the main, I think, to be relevant to some of the discussions about whether they're sustainable, accessible sites, but on sites like this, where I don't think that's necessarily in question, it'll be more about parking, how it relates to parking standards and so on. So, and then it is in, I think, the flood zone, the table says it's in flood zone 1. I think the EA in your topic paper accept the fact it's in flood zones 2 and 3. And I think you've assessed that. You've carried out, well, you've got a topic paper on the sequential test, and L does pick up on sustainable drainage to minimise and mitigate flood risk, so that may be enough. But again, I think there'll be a consistency issue to come back on about how flood risk is referred to in design principles, and again, it may be cross-referencing to the relevant DM policy, because obviously it must incorporate SUDs. It seems fine on the face of it, but obviously national policy and guidance does allow exceptions to that. So maybe that it would have to be. And then there's no reference here to, and again, it might be perfectly legitimate based on its location, but again, it's just things I've picked up in terms of consistency about things like living conditions. Again, not mentioned here about impact on other people's living conditions, albeit it could be a 48-metre building, which looks, at least on the inset map, to be quite close to some other residential properties. So again, it was picked up anyway, I accept that, acknowledge that, but if you've referred to it in some policies and not others, then it does call into question why. But I think that's all from me. Mr. Byrne, have you any points you want to raise?
Sorry, sir. Yes, just one quick point of clarity. So the 148 in July 2023 was approved with the second staircases. That was the change then. So there isn't an outstanding second staircase issue to be resolved. And there does seem to be some activity on the planning application sort of recently, although to the existing approval. The only other question I had, it mentions access to the, well, such something I did understand, I wasn't sure if it was important. It mentions access to the site to the north, and there's a blue line around the site to the north, and I wasn't sure what that site was, and whether it's an allocated site or meant to just be referring to something more general.
Sorry, where are you?
So it has a blue line around it on the...
Where is it talk? Oh, should enable connections to the existing site to the north.
Yeah.
Oh, good point, yes.
And then there's an existing site, but what... there is a site slightly further north than that, I think, that's was proposed for a rather controversial tower block, which we all remember discussing in this room. But I don't think that was the site. So I just wasn't sure what it was referring to.
Yeah, good point, actually. It would be helpful to, yeah, and what that faded blue line refers to on the inset map, I suppose.
I'm just going to check on the key for the line, but in terms of the site to the north, that is simply referring to, so there's on the triangle, if you look at this as a triangle, 3 sites, there's a parade of shops, a residential development with a car park in front of it just to the north, and that's the site there. So it's talking about having routes through, and a route at the north of that, of our site, of the 241 Green Street site, into that residential one, with the idea that potentially in the future there could be more of a direct route to the station in conjunction with other development coming forward. That's the answer to that.
I suppose when it refers to this existing site, it does, I guess, infer an allocation or something like that, rather than existing residential area to the north, I suppose. Is that?
I don't think that's the intention, but perhaps we just look at that wording, make sure it's clear that it's the existing residential to the north.
Yeah.
Because there isn't another site allocation.
There's no allocation,
Yeah.
although that blue line. So I'm now on my second appendix. I'm on my second appendix, which has fallen apart. So I'm trying to keep this one intact. Oh, it's defined as a local centre.
It's local centre.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so it would be, so local could be, I guess B
Yeah.
could be referred to, is either residential or access to the local centre to the north then, is that more
Yeah. I mean,
clear? Yeah.
I think the key there is just having a route, not just having a sealed off site and having a route going to the north through the site, which is what is secured in the planning permission.
I think, local centre residential area, I think I take Mr Burns' point, referring to the site does imply an allocation, I think,
Yeah.
so. Okay, thank you. If there's nothing else on that, none? Oh, sorry, Mr Gillespie.
Just to clarify on the second staircase application, I don't believe there has been a decision notice issued, sir, on that variation. It's section 106 negotiations still, but there's no decision notice actually issued.
That does imply then it's live. The application's not lapsed because obviously you couldn't be negotiating 106 on it otherwise.
Yes.
But I suppose it also suggests that there is still some interest in bringing the site forward. It's not dead in the water if there's this.
So, yes,
you may wish to think about whether or not you want to conclude in the 5-year supply or not. That's on that basis.
Yeah, so we'll take that away. We've had instructions from the case officer. We understand that the original permission is believed to have lapsed, although it appears that they've accepted that it must be a Section 73 application could be made dependent on the lapsed permission. So the original permission has lapsed. It appears to be the position that they're considering a Section 73 application, or maybe it's a new application using the earlier permission as a baseline. But we'll need to just work out exactly what's happening there. So, but the original permission is considered to have lapsed.
Okay. Luckily for me, I don't have to get into how you deal with a Section 73 application on a permission that's lapsed, but luckily I'm not involved in that. But obviously, when it comes to the trajectory, I've got a note, I suppose, about this site and where it appears, and if you, it sounds like it's if there is no extant permission, then it's obviously outside the deliverable. Particularly as even if there's some discussions, it doesn't sound like there are clearly issues. So it's not like jumping out at me as being a 5-year supply site.
I think that the fact that the extant permission has lapsed solves the issue for all purposes. Thank you.
Okay. So any more points on that one? No? Good. Well, obviously, Mr. Byrne, you are welcome to disappear. Thank you. May see you later, or may not, if you've decided you don't need to attend. Well, thank you for your contributions. Right, so we'll move on then to URB 2. So we're into Cockfosters Station car park. I suppose the first question really is what the status is. There any scheme on this or how it's come about? I'm assuming it's a call for site. Obviously, I don't know if there's no indication in anything that there's a planning application in place. So just where we are with it.
Thank you, sir. So this site is a site that has been brought forward by TfL in conjunction with a development partner to build to rent scheme. Permission was granted, or at least a resolution to grant. We'll double check, but permission was there was a resolution to grant in I believe it was 2021. However, that permission was stopped from happening by the Transport Secretary. It's an unusual case where basically because the land is owned by TfL, to change it from car parking, which is its current use, although it has been sealed off, into housing, it needed permission from the Secretary of State for transport. So it's out with the planning. Since the new governments came in, they've changed that decision. So the scheme has been approved by the Transport Secretary to be developed, and we believe an application will be forthcoming at some point to resolve issues around second staircases and other deliverability aspects, buildability, and other parts of that, to bring forward this permission. But at current, there's nothing on site.
So there's no permission at the moment.
Yes, sorry. I misread my note. I said no permission. I actually written permission. So, because I was just looking, it says, the site benefits from, if I'm looking in the right place, site benefits from an implemented planning permission for residential mixed-use development. So that's on paragraph 21. Is that not the case? Not implemented then? It's just because paragraph 21 of your hearing statement says the site benefits from an implemented planning permission. Sorry, it says Cockfight. Yeah, is that?
Sorry, we're just blurring. Okay, so there's another
Right next to allocation, right next to this, sorry.
And I was actually go to that one yesterday. So when you said the car park was sealed up, I wasn't sure because I'm sure I saw cars parked in it.
Okay, so obviously that application hasn't been implemented.
No. I didn't look like it, to be fair, yeah.
Yeah.
But there is a.
Yeah, it's a slightly unusual situation given the kind of the inclusion of the Secretary of State for Transport and the scale of which it was discussed in the previous couple of years. But as we understand it, TfL intends to submit a new application at some point to resolve the buildability issues, building regulation issues, etc. But there is no variation for that existing permission as of
But that
yet.
permission exists. It's not. It's,
Yes,
it was. So it was granted, but they couldn't legally deliver it.
Essentially, yeah.
Okay. But that permission was again 20. So is that expired?
I'm going to check for you.
Yeah. Although clearly that permission's not going to be delivered, so it's a moot point. But just. Yeah.
Indeed, so with the dual core issue.
I think so. It's also worth noting that this site is particularly sensitive in terms of heritage, in terms of greenbelt. Impact on the greenbelt is right adjacent to it, and a very long and thorough pre-app and I guess determination process assess the quality of the scheme and the impact on heritage, registered park and garden. So I think there isn't. I think what we have in that permission is something that we know has been thoroughly well tested in terms of height, in terms of number of homes, quality of accommodation, and I think we're fairly confident that can be delivered on that site. But we await the application for the necessary variations from the developer.
So So principle been established. Just in terms of the parking then, yeah, you said it was sealed off. Just to confirm that, because I visited the site. I didn't go wander. I must admit, I didn't go wandering around the car park because nobody appreciates that. But I stood, saw the entrance, and it seemed. And there's two elements to this. There's one, the small triangle land to the sort of south of the station. That certainly had cars parked in. It did look like it was operational. So a natural question to me, notwithstanding the permission, is has the effect on parking been assessed, and I guess also the effect on local traffic and so on and so forth.
Thank you, sir. So that was assessed during the planning application. I may have got mixed up with the Arnold's Grove site we discussed the other week, which has been sealed off and is also a car park. So apologies, sir. But in terms of the car parking assessment was a major constraint on this application, and the material submitted by the applicant at the time demonstrated that it would be acceptable to remove that public car park. And I think there is a reduced element to it. There is also a provision within the plan for the TfL facility for the drivers of the tube. So this is the terminus station. They will have to drive here to start the service, essentially, at unsociable hours. And there's a provision for quite a few, in the dozens, I believe, car parking spaces reserved for those workers, given that they can't access the site by public transport outside of the hours of public transport. So that is also a consideration for parking on the site, which has been considered in the application. And again, as a local planning authority, we're content with that, and I don't think we'd want to reopen that as another thing in that variation if it comes forward, when it comes forward.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Question I was going to ask popped in my head and popped out again. Maybe will come back to me as we go through the criteria. So. Hold on, let me just get this right in my head. So it's had a permission, that's not going to be delivered, it's likely to be coming in with a new one. The principle was established, and that's why you consider it acceptable. So in terms of delivery timescales, at the moment you've got it in 351 for what would be the current 5-year period. Is that still expected, or is it likely to be pushed back to 10 plus years?
I think if given the permissions already established the principle and tested the major issues of the site, and we're just looking at a variation, and our experience so far in the borough of dealing with these kind of applications is that they're relatively straightforward to deal with in principle, because you're trying not to change too much about the application itself. I think that could stay in the 5-year range.
Sorry, sir, can I just add to that very briefly? So the existing consent was granted on the 4th of September 2023 with a 3-year time limit, so it is still extant at the moment. And I guess the only other thing to add to what's just been said in terms of the delivery, I suspect in reality we might find that 351 is split between the 5-year period and the next 10-year period. Probably, I think, in terms of delivery.
Yeah, slightly awkward to say the framework's definition of deliverable, as we know, is that it's a detailed permission, then it's in the deliverable unless there's evidence that it won't. There is evidence that this permission won't be delivered. So it then falls into the second category as being would be an allocation where there is, I suppose, where there's evidence that it will be delivered on the basis that you've got an extant permission already and at least some indication. I mean, I think, for as far as I'm concerned, the bar here is probably slightly different to what if I was dealing with an appeal or an inquiry. I'd be looking at probably more, but this is a local plan. It's not quite the same, I don't think. At least from my point of view, it's a different order of things. And so you've got information that's TfL are looking to bring it forward. Just out of interest, I mean, this is one of those sort of doesn't really, again, outside my, and I'm getting dangerously into emission sites, which I shouldn't do, but it is connected to the station. I couldn't help but notice on the opposite side of the station, there is, well, it's still part of the station, is a what looks to be a vacant office block with the station, with the ground floor and below probably being the station. I just, out of interest really, more curiosity about what I suppose it was a curiosity as to why that wasn't included in the allocation, bearing in mind that it's clearly vacant, or whether something was happening on it anyway. It's just sort of useful context for me, really.
So there's no live planning application on that site. Obviously, it would be looking at the area as a whole. It would be lovely to have a kind of comprehensive scheme come forward. We could get benefits, heritage benefits to that station included in that. Potentially looking at the whole area as a whole. And obviously, as you've seen, that office building could use a bit of improvement, if not redevelopment. But as I said, we don't have a live application at this stage, and I believe the site allocation was just submitted by TfL as part of the call for sites.
That's fine. I mean, I suppose it comes down to, as far as you're concerned. I mean, I'm going slightly beyond my thing, but it goes into site selection methodology, I suppose. Back to matter 5 about how opportunities are identified, and I suppose from your perspective, you don't know what if TfL presumably own that land, what their intentions are, so couldn't include it.
Yeah, that's correct. We don't know what the intentions are.
Okay. Right. I'm just going through the normal issues then on. Sorry, I'll just go back to delivery. So yeah, I'll take it from yourself, Ms. Kenny and Ms. Gillespie said that you're looking at, it might be the 5 years, so I might split between the two. But clearly, again, if I've got some views on this, I can advise in 4 months' time saying, right, no, I think that should go forward or back, but I'll take it away with me. But on infrastructure requirements, I was looking at the modifications. It's 2. I think there's a modification suggested. It talks about Arness Grove. I think that's a typo, and it should be Cockfosters anyway. But then there's a modification to talk about contributions focusing on general station access and capacity improvements. Again, fairly standard stuff we've seen before. I'm not. Again, when what comes out of the wash in terms of how some of these things are expressed in terms of if it's required. The irony here, of course, is TfL asking for a contribution to something that TfL is delivering, so they should be quite content, I suppose, with contributions to improvements to the station, but there's still regs to think about. So that's one thing, and then but again, general thing there. Clearly, this is one site where you've highlighted the fact it's in a groundwater abstraction area, so it's just a bit of a consistency issue, but nothing untoward. I will say on the say, I don't think the I don't think modifications to number 2, apart from serving Cockfosters, will get into. I don't think that if I conclude that sort of form of words is needed or some change is needed, I don't think it's going to get into contribution should focus on general station access or capacity improvements, because that's how you spend a contribution is subject to the application, not what the policy says, and TfL would be spending it, so it's a bit of an odd form of words. I've said that before. In terms of design principles, most of these are fairly standard. D, must consider implications of Thames water main running through the site. I guess they would. It'd be odd if they didn't. But to what end? Again, what you consider, how is a decision maker supposed to, what's the outcome of that? Again, not disrupting or causing problems, presumably, but to ensure. So you must consider implications of Thames water main running to ensure that, or something, I don't know. Even if D is needed, which I might debate it isn't. You do have something about mitigating the impact on heritage assets in H, so that's fine. And you've got something about considering long views from Trent Park Conservation Area. We talked about that in another session. That's an odd form of words to me, about long views from the conservation area. Presumably, actually, what you mean is impacting on the setting. It would be views into the conservation area or something. But I think the real point is considering the effect on the setting of the conservation area rather than long views. It's just an odd form of words. You've got the overlooking issue. K, obviously nothing wrong in principle, I think there's a more suitable form of words for that, as we've talked about before. And in L, we've got car-free development here, which, okay, that's, and it is in PTAL 6A, so yeah, that's inconsistent with the local London plan. And again, there's a modification suggested which talks about consistent with the London plan. Well, fine, I don't think I have any particular objection to that. Probably not, in this case, it's probably not needed because it's quite clear what you're expecting, car-free, and it coincides with the London plan. So is it necessary to make the plan sound? Probably not. But when we look at the plan as a whole and making sure parking issues are sort of clear, then it might well fall into that category. So fine. Beg your pardon, there is another suggested modification to I. So it must consider long views from Trent Park Conservation and should demonstrate how it is responded to and taken account of the significance listed by this chief. So that second part is fine. So I think, again, we've talked again about how heritage might generally be addressed in some of these policies. But reflecting on the conservation area and the listed tube station, obviously there's nothing wrong with that, and it probably is suitable and sensible to draw attention to the tube station. Whether it's that exact form of words or not, I'm not sure, but at least, I think some recognition of that is obviously very sensible. So you've addressed that, and say the only thing on parking. Again, just going back to the parking, and it's because the modification put to me in L deletes but doesn't refer to any of the other stuff about on-street parking. We've talked about that all before, and again, it looked to think the council to determine whether it wants all that on-street parking. But I suppose here is the question, and I think it was in one of the other TfL or one of the other tube stations or railway stations talked about car-free development subject to adequate servicing and dropping off and so on and so forth. So again, whether or not that needs to be reflected here, because presumably the TfL still wants some kind of, that might still be a factor in terms of operation of the station. And as you said before, there's going to be disabled parking, isn't there? Almost definitely. So reflecting that probably is, I guess, useful. So that'd be I think the other action I would have there. So various actions, some of them normal, but I think, parking. And again, sorry, if there's that operational element, if that's something they still want to maintain, the operational element of drivers and so on, then again, the policy might want to reflect. Is it, again, slightly odd, because TfL are the ones proposing. It seems that they'll put forward what they think is appropriate, but you want the policy presumably. So if you're saying that's how it operates now, but that's not what they want, then fine.
I think so. The drivers use says it's more of a requirement from TfL as the developer. And interacting with themselves as an organisation, trying to balance up, the needs of the service and the car, and the housing. So I don't know if it would necessarily be something that we would want to ask for.
Okay.
It's something that TfL has the power to keep it within their scheme, and we kind of have to take their word as the runner of the operator of the transport network that they need this provision.
I suppose it's again, it's just about mentoring effectiveness, isn't it? And making sure the words match the intention. So the words are, should deliver car free. Now there's implications for that when you look at the London plan and what that means in practice. But actually, if the council would be content with TfL putting forward its operational requirements, which would therefore involve a degree of parking, that's not car free. So you need to be clear what it is you want. If you ask, no, we don't really care what TfL want. We want car free, subject to disabled parking and so on. That's what we want. That's fine. But if you're actually content to see something not quite car free for operational reasons, the policy should probably reflect it.
Yes, I wonder if the answer is that it's not part of. It's something that should be referred to in the land use requirements, because the operational car parking use required there is not actually connected to the housing, it's connected to another site. So perhaps the answer is it should go into the land use requirements, and then the car free, maybe there needs to be a separate principle related to that, but the car free point would still apply to the housing, subject to disability, which obviously comes out through the London plan.
That's fine. All I'm eager to ensure is that the avoiding unintended consequences.
Yeah.
Okay, any more on, is there any more points on this you want to raise? No? 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 Okay, so we've gone on to URB 05 finally this morning. Which is the New Avenue estate. I'm not, obviously no one, I'm not sure. At some point, obviously somebody wanted to send this, and that's why it's in this list, but I've got very few points to make. But the usual questions apply at the start, I suppose, which is the status. I think reps that have been made suggest the site is under construction. So I guess it's explaining the current situation, how the numbers in the plan, albeit there's only a couple of hundred, relate to those permissions, and is there any land left coming forward, and so on and so forth.
Thank you, sir. So, New Avenue Estate is a joint venture estate regeneration of the same age as the Alma Estate, so they came forward at the same time under a regeneration programme. New Avenue is slightly more advanced. It has one phase left to complete, which is phase 3 of 219 homes. So permission was an application was submitted in 2016 for the full site, and a variation to provide an uplift on those numbers was was granted in 2022 and is being implemented currently. So the figure you're seeing is a net figure, which again takes into account the existing number of homes that have been demolished to allow for the estate to be rebuilt. So we might need to just, in light of what we discussed on Alma and that discussion about the trajectory, we might just need to take that number away and make sure it's consistent with what we're saying on Alma as well. And as I said, it's the decade-long regeneration projects, and more accounting issues with the numbers.
That's right, Sarah. And I was just going to flag that in fairness, Mr. Byrne, who's not here this morning, this was another site that he refers to when making his same point about net versus gross.
Okay, so with that, actually, yeah, I think again, if the numbers that come out and we can sort out the gross and net, and it's all clear, are based on permissions, example permissions, then I'll take that as being sort of logical point to set the logical figure to include in the plan. And again, I'll leave it with you. I think to make how the land use requirements are amended to say whether it's approximate or up to or minimum, depending on what your views are on what's left to be. What's left to be delivered. So fine. In terms of delivery, obviously, if the whole site's got detailed permission, I'm assuming you're content that whatever's left is still in the 5-year supply.
Yeah. Again, might be off the site visit just to check for our own purposes exactly where it is, but as I understand it, that final phase is it will be everything. It's not. Sorry about that.
All right.
I'll try and summarise what I just said. Yes, the site is being implemented. It's on site. Even just to quickly look on Google Maps just now, we can see most of the site has been built out, and the phase 3 site is cleared with a site compound. And again, being brought forward joint venture with a developer who want to get going on site as soon as possible, have permission in place. So we expect that to come forward soon.
Is this another one where it might still be time for revisions, possibly, but quite unlikely that this one will be triggered anyway?
I think it's unlikely.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. Fine. So in terms of policy itself, we've got the infrastructure requirements are quite, again, oddly quite scant for a scheme that's got permission. Some of the applications, some of these sites that have got permission, obviously the infrastructure requirements have reflected what was in 106 or there or thereabouts. It might well be, of course, it's a bit like the Alma estate where actually everything's been delivered, so there's no need to put anything else in because it's all been agreed. But either way, again, just a consistency check there to make sure there's nothing that's expected that should be in that list. I will also just point out the land use requirements talk about new homes and re-provision of non-residential floor space suitable for provision of social infrastructure, e.g. creche, nursery, health facility. So, again, are those things are they part of the permission? Are they already been implemented? Are they, not absolute requirements, so don't need to go in the infrastructure requirements? I think it's just making sure that there's some direct link between land use requirements and the policy. So I don't think it's even listed in the design principles. I might be wrong about that. I don't think there's anything that talks about the non-residential uses, where again there are in some other policies. So, how are they to be addressed and so on. So yeah, there's a missing link between what's set out there and what's in the policy, or what's not in the policy.
So as I understand it, the remaining phases are solely residential. So any re-provision has been provided on the site already.
Okay. So land use requirement may as well just remove reference to non-residential and take out 319. Then I guess square meters of
correct.
Just to avoid any doubt. And then. So that means the policy doesn't need to refer to those. That's good. The G. Okay. Sorry. Tall buildings. So presumably the permission doesn't include tall buildings. I'm just going to double check that. Or G says tall buildings are not.
Yeah, that's correct. Sorry, it does. It does actually include tall buildings. This is actually, we'll come to the discussion of the tall buildings policy, but this is actually where one of the exceptions in the tall building policy was generated from. So around impact caused by unique topography. Essentially, the site sits in a kind of bowl, so its impact is actually very limited from around the surrounding area, which is low-rise residential. And I think, but regardless of that, the site already had its permission in the before the evidence base or the tall buildings policy was created, and actually is without that, if that exception didn't exist here, I don't think we would support this as an area for tall buildings, given its relative isolation from public transport town centres, generally more sustainable locations. So it's a kind of falling between, it's a unique case, but it's also just extant. If that makes sense.
Yeah. I must have picked up on that, and whether the reps make this point, because I've obviously said
they do make a point of it.
The permission allows for tall buildings, so the principles. So yes, The issue then is that if, let's say again, this might be moot if the whole thing is being built out, and it's one of these might be semantic, academic points. But if an application were to come in for the number of dwellings that the plan allows for, and that's the net increase, but the only way that can be delivered through a tall building, assuming that's how that number has been reached, then does that mean that irrespective of the permission, the capacity you've set out is too high? I.e., is the policy seeking to reflect a situation that you would, because you say, is this historical accident, whatever you want to it's an extant thing, that's there, nothing you can do about it. If they build it out, good luck to them. But the world's moved on. If the council, and when the application came in now, the council would not be content with that number of dwellings, because the only way to deliver that number of dwellings is to do it through a tall building, and we're no longer content with tall buildings. So yeah, because obviously there might be other situations where you've got exempt permissions where you say, well, if they came in with the same thing, we're quite happy with that number, because if they came in again, we've got no problem with it. And as you said with the Cockfosters, you've granted permission for a 30, whatever, or 40 million, whatever it was, tall building. If that came in again, no issue in principle. Here, if you've got an issue in principle, if they reapplied now, and you would be saying, well, no, actually, the world has moved on, and we've got new evidence to suggest it isn't acceptable. Should the policy be reflecting that position, or should the policy be reflecting what's the extant permission?
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
It does make sense. It does make sense, and I think this is a unique case. As I say, this did generate an exception test in the policy around the topography of the site, meaning that you genuinely can't really perceive that there's a taller building there. And when we say tall, it's not skyscraper. It's just by definition the London plan tall. And I think it might be better if this policy reflected that tall buildings are appropriate on this site of a certain height, as is demonstrated by the permission. Because we've actually, and it could just be because that is this exception, and it's generously that hasn't followed through into the policy wording itself. But I think if we have used this as a piece of evidence that we can accept tall buildings in places that aren't appropriate only if they're not having an impact on the skyline or other aspects, then we wouldn't want this. We wouldn't want the site allocation to stop something which we know is acceptable to not be able to happen.
And as worded, it would.
Exactly.
So as worded,
Yep.
you'd have a problem, because you'd have an applicant could say it's not very academic, but an applicant could say we want to deliver you 200 dwellings.
Yeah.
You'd go, well, no, because it's tall building.
Exactly.
And then you'd have a whole section 38.6 and material considerations and what's been granted in the past and all that lovely stuff. So on that basis, and we might come back to it when we deal with DE6, if I remember, because it might well be, well, why wouldn't you just identify this under DE? Yeah, if there are topographical reasons why it might be acceptable, then it might be that you would amend DE6 to reflect that. I don't know. That's for a different day. That's just a thought out loud. But I guess, to all intents and purposes, if you're talking about effectiveness and justification, at the moment, tall buildings are not considered acceptable on this site is not actually justified because you've accepted them.
Yes, sir. I think if what has been included in the plan under the banner of implementation needs to move into the policy requirements, then I think there is a tension there. If those figures, what we're requiring from the site is based on something that we're, with the other hand, saying is unacceptable. I'm sure there's some language which can refer specifically to the urban design assessment of the building that has permission, and make it clear that that's what's being talked about, and it doesn't cut across the broader tall building evidence base.
Yeah, something like taller buildings or tall building would be acceptable subject to these considerations, or may be acceptable subject to these considerations. So at least it's clear what it is would be having regard to, as well as a cross-reference D6 probably. Okay, that seems sensible. I say at the moment it is an action anyway. Clearly G is not justified, or if G is justified, then the numbers aren't justified. So there is a tension that's got to be addressed one way or the other. So. Just bear with me. I'm not plugged in. I don't think there are any modifications to this one. So in terms of L, should provide parking on street as well integrating the public realm with long runs broken down with tree planting. That's obviously a very different way of addressing parking to wherever else has been addressed parking. Again, I'm not necessarily saying it's unsound, it's just unusual. So, because every other allocation has been at least seeking a certain outcome in terms of numbers. So I don't know, again, if from a matter of consistency, I'm not quite, it's unusual that it's not been picked up, I guess, in the mods, that someone's or maybe it's just because permission's been, the whole site's got permission, so, it's all been dealt with, so it's not been considered necessary. But I suppose I would suggest for matters of internal consistency, you would want to be looking at L. I mean, what PTAL is it? 1A to 1B, so that would actually allow quite significant, that would be quite a generous, again, quite a generous parking provision if you were dealing with it in terms of London plan. So I don't know if that's acceptable to the council or not. So. Okay, and then I think that's pretty much it for me. K. Again, I'm not dying in a ditch over these things, but must carefully consider relation with existing culvert. Well, yeah, obviously, but to what end? But I'm not going to lose too much sleep over those things or fail the plan entirely. You just might want to tidy some of this stuff up when we, so that's. I think that's it for me on those. Any more from you on those? No? No?
No, thank you, sir. Okay,
thank you. So, yeah, we've got, have a slightly longer lunch. Again, bearing in mind we've been here till 6:45 some nights and everything else, it's probably not a bad thing to have slightly more time to reflect on things and do a little bit more work. So we'll adjourn now and return at 2 o'clock. And we'll pick up this afternoon's sites. And again, I'll probably rejig the order just depending on attendees just to see what they want to talk about. And thank you very much. So thank you all for your contributions, and I'll see you at 2 o'clock. Thank you.